Good morning, friends and family of the internet and fellow watchers on the wall. We have to get into this. What are we going to cover today? Well, we are going to talk about some weird things with the Charlie Kirk assassination and the Mormon mafia. We're going to talk about something called theocracy. We're going to talk about end times, what we're seeing happen in real time, how all of that's controlled. It all connects back to MK Ultra. We're going to deep dive these topics, how Mormonism is basically directly, it's a religious version of being Masonic. Okay. I've said this a lot. I know that some people find it highly offensive. Let me quote the Bible. Do not accept a spirit of offense. Put it off. Okay. Just hear me. I need you to understand that the Mormons are the militant arm, the religious militant arm of the shadow government of the United States. The same as the Jesuits are the militant arm of the shadow government in the Catholic Church. Am I saying that all Catholics, all Mormons are going to pick up a weapon and hunt you down? No, no, I'm not. Not at all. I also want to clarify for you guys that because I show you something or I introduce a topic to you doesn't mean that I myself believe it or that I'm promoting the person sharing it. I think President Trump is extremely busy right now running our country and the world. All right. I think he's doing what he believes is best for America with America First policies. And what you're seeing happen is the Democrat group, political affiliation, just shut down the government over illegal aliens getting free medical insurance. And I'm going to tell you guys the truth. I've done videos on this. JD Vance nailed it when he said Americans are going into emergency rooms and sitting for hours behind half of the emergency room filled with illegal immigrants. People call that racist. Well, how can you tell they're illegal? You don't know by looking at someone if they're illegal, and that is true. But ever since my husband has gotten sick, I have sat in many emergency rooms and watched thousands of people couldn't speak a lick of English. That might be a hint that they aren't here, organically or correctly, be taken in front of us, therefore basically pushing back our emergency for a very long period of time. I do have an issue with that. And I have spoken about it a few months back. What the Democrats did not understand is that Trump has a long game. And they just played directly into his hands. Now he can defund these DEI projects that woke liberal judges were trying to cockblock him in the court system from doing. He's going to remove people from positions in the federal government that he was having trouble getting rid of. The more concerning thing for me is that people think because I'm showing a clip that maybe Trump is in that I've turned on Trump. Are you saying if I've got something to say, Sam will say it? A lot of times I'm trying to show you a narrative of what is being done that people are not noticing. Yesterday's video, when I brought up that they're trying to build an army and, Trump is up there talking and that happened to be in the clip, people automatically assumed that I meant Trump is trying to build his own army. No, not at all. I don't even think Trump realizes it's happening because he's busy. Trump is not on social media like you and I are, friends and family. You're looking at it through your eyes. Like, why doesn't Trump know this? Because he's busy. He's juggling hundreds of foreign governments and thousands of major problems every single day. He does not have time to do what you and I do. It's called having grace for someone. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. Let that sink in. I want to talk about how the Mormon church has rebranded itself. And oh, they have done an amazing job. You go back to the 1800s, the Mormon church believed that they were one of the 12 tribes of Judah. They were one of the original Jewish tribes. So basically, the elders of the Mormon church believed that they were the chosen, that they were Jewish people. And they're going to recreate Zion here in America, which is honestly where I think most people are hearing those conspiracies where maybe America is what was the original Jerusalem, and this is where, Jesus was and all that. I kind of think maybe the Mormon church pushed that out to control the narrative. All right. Because archaeologically, even if you don't necessarily agree with Smithsonian stuff, there is so much evidence that Jerusalem is the real Jerusalem sitting in the Middle East. Like, it's so much evidence. So I think that they have rebranded themselves because originally the Mormon church's entire plan was to create something called a theocracy. So, welcome back, friends and family. Let's get into this. Let's talk about the ties to Charlie Kirk's assassination in Utah by a Mormon. What does this mean? What does this look like? We're even going to touch a little bit on the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion and how it was a Mormon business that created the O-rings that failed. And if you understand that the Mormon church believes, and yes, they do, that their people that have gone through all the temples and all the rituals will become gods of their own planet and birth spirit children and create like the gods created, you understand that maybe there's a reason that they're embedded in places like NASA. Mormons are embedded in the FBI, Homeland Security, the CIA, even ties to MK Ultra. I mean, the ties are there. The evidence is there. I don't have to make it up. It's not a long shot. By the way, YouTube does not pay me. They consider Samantha's content to be dangerous. If you enjoy these types of deep dives, please pray about rowing in our boat. My husband does have surgery in 12 days. He has a brain aneurysm. He's 46 and he will not be working. And like most of you guys, we just, live a regular life, right? And we're doing the best that we can. Have you guys heard this? Charlie Kirk may be getting a silver dollar. This was September 25th, 2025. They are thinking about, and I'm hearing that there's legislation being put forth to put Charlie Kirk on actual American money. But they are making a silver coin for Charlie Kirk. Does anybody else see the connection to Jesus with the silver? Breaking bill filed to put Charlie Kirk on 400,000 US silver dollars. Kirk was not a political figure, so why is he being memorialized with the silver dollar, at least potentially? His influence in the right wing circles was significant, and he has been painted as somewhat of a martyr. I do believe they are pushing him into almost a stance of idolatry. I loved Charlie Kirk. I watched him for many, many years. I appreciated him because he was one of the last conservative large platforms that truly followed the Bible and supported Israel. And you don't find that right now. He didn't care about sitting down and just talking to people and showing them the truth. And I appreciated that in him. I think what they're doing in his memory is horrific. I do believe that they are trying to create some kind of civil war in this country. I believe that the neoconservatives, the ones who are actually fascist and probably more aligned with Hitler than you and I would ever be comfortable with and would ever back, they're part of that hidden game. I've often thought, and I'm sure most of you have also, how does Satan end up creating a one world government with a one world religion? There are so many religions and people who are willing to die for their religions. How's he going to do this, right? Well, he's going to do it through something called theocracy. By the way, I published a book, Growing Under a Poison Sky. You can literally find it everywhere. Look into that. It's very interesting. While historic animosities fuel the fighting, Sudan is yet another proxy conflict between the Middle East squabbling theocracies, with Qatar and Iran major backers of the Sudanese government and the UAE bankrolling the RSF, according to UN sanctioned monitors. So, what is a theocracy? It is a government of a state that is governed immediately by divine guidance or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided. A state governed by theocracy, a state governed by the church. A theocracy is going to be what Satan uses during the one world government. Okay. So theocracy is where the church that is in control, their leaders through divine prophets, through divine words from the Lord, are going to tell you and I what we can and can't do. They're not even concerned about setting up an actual government for freedoms of people with constitutions and stuff. No, they're concerned, ready for this, friends and family, with just telling you what is right and wrong, right? So the Mormon church back in the 1800s, that is what they wanted. If you go back, you look up Deseret, that was going to be their country. All right. And right now, if you go into Washington, D.C., I can't think of the name of it, the long, tall monument, the skinny one like a needle. It'll come to me because I've seen it. There are stones from all of the soon to be states and colonies when they built that. When Utah sent theirs, it says Deseret on it, which is so odd. It doesn't say Utah. It says Deseret. Look that up. That's real. Okay. So, this is the thing. If you go back, we who can look back upon the terrible cost of the fratricidal war, which put an end to slavery, now say that such a solution of the difficulty, Joseph Smith and Emerson's, would have been worthy a Christian statesman. But if the retired scholar was in advance of his time when he advocated this disposition of the public property in 1855, what shall I say of the political and religious leader who had committed himself in print as well as in conversation to the same course in 1844? I cite this example to illustrate the radical tone of Joseph Smith's political thought, which seemed to carry over from his religious radicalism. It extended to prison reform and better treatment of seamen, which were big issues in the 1840s and 1850s. Smith seemed to identify with all of the underdogs in society. I think that is why he thought he might get elected, because the little people, the beat up people, would rise and select him. So, in other words, Joseph Smith was going to, I guess, run for Boston mayor or maybe even one day president. And the Mormons at this point had already written their own constitution for the territory that is now Utah, but it was much bigger. It was called Deseret. You need to look all that up, guys. I could do it for you, but it would take hours and people are busy. So I just want to give you the highlights here. Everything will be in description of the video if you want to go back and read this yourself. would rise and select him. This part of his platform accords perfectly with what modern people like us would have liked in a candidate in 1844 to say. But Smith went beyond our sense of political propriety in other parts of his platform. He blended his role as candidate with his role as prophet. He was already mayor of Navajo and lieutenant general of the Navajo Legion when he ran for the presidency. He seemingly had no sense that the church and state should be separated. He gave no hint that he was going to give up his religious offices if he were to become president of the United States. So yes, this shows you how the long game is being played in the Mormon church. You got the Mormon church. They're militant, they're violent, they're taking territory that belongs to the United States government. And the U.S. has to send troops to this area to control these people. The entire time, their leader is planning to run for president of the United States to create a theocracy. In other words, they believe that the United States, the Constitution of the United States, was not the supreme law of the land, but that whomever God chose to be prophet would tell you and I what would be the supreme law of the land. Okay. It says Joseph Smith indirectly, but I think clearly offered himself to be the priest of the people as well as the president. I would, as the universal friend of man, open the prisons, open the eyes, open the ears, and open the hearts of all people to behold and enjoy freedom, unadulterated freedom. And God, who once cleansed the violence of the earth with blood, whose son laid down his life for the salvation of all his father gave him out of the world, and who has promised that he will come and purify the world again with fire in the last days, should be supplicated by me for the good of all the people. So he would be the intercessor as priest as well as prophet. Of course, that is point at which moderns, of course, that is the point at which moderns part company with Joseph Smith. We don't want a prophet with his authoritative words from God governing the nation. That seems to lead to the exclusion of unbelievers and the repression of naysayers. All the alarm bells go off when we see these roles merging. Friends and family, this is serious. This is serious. I mean, the Mormon church wanted to take over the federal government and create a theocracy. So whoever sat as president of the United States would be both priest, prophet, and basically king. Okay? I would appeal to you before you turn away completely from that idea to pay heed to the underlying theme of that platform and that proposal. I think it can be argued that Joseph Smith actually felt he was fulfilling one of America's dreams. We think of the American dream as the promise of ascent for the wretched, teeming on our shores, the promise that in America, everyone has a chance to prosper and achieve respectability. That is a dream for an individual. But there's also a corporate dream, whether we like it or not, and that is of righteous America, a people who are blessed of God, in America not too far from Joseph Smith's Zion, where the people are of one heart and one mind and dwell in righteousness, and there are no poor among them. So it says here, Joseph Smith's word for his own political philosophy was theocracy, God and the people. Yeah. So it's a really interesting read. It's really interesting. You guys should go and read this because it just shows why Mitt Romney was not elected, why people were very concerned. Because, like I said, I do believe there's a religious war coming, and it's going to end up being a civil war here in America, right? They're going to take devout Christians, people like you and I love the Lord, but then you're also going to group the Jesuits and the Mormons into that Christian pot. But then that leaves really only the Muslims who already run theocracies in the Middle East. I mean, look at every country where Muslims rule. That's a theocracy. Does that look like something you want to live under, even by so-called Christians? Not me. Not me. I don't. Who's going to win it? Right? The Mormon church is the richest church in the entirety of the world outside of the Roman Catholic Church, which is, still more of a political thing when you get to where it is than actually Catholic Church. So it's a much younger church than the Roman Catholic Church, and yet it's like worth billions and billions. They rebranded themselves. They realized that their militant beliefs in taking America over couldn't be done by presenting a Mormon as president. People were very weary of Mormons. They did not appreciate the way that Mormons moved in as groups. They stayed to themselves. They started their own business. They put their money back into each other instead of the community as a whole. And then they would, as one, vote, therefore shifting whole elections in the direction that they and their prophets told them to shift it. People didn't like that. That's not the idea of America. America is that each person has their own right to make a decision, and therefore their vote would count. But if you have a community that is being told you have to vote this way, then it really does mess with the whole idea of a constitutional republic. That's what's happening where the Muslims are concerned today. That's what they're doing in America. That's what they're doing in England. They're coming in, they're staying in tight-knit groups so that they can sway on a grassroots level. They're not worried about swaying the federal government right now. They're taking over at a grassroots level. And that's what Mormons did. But people in the 1800s wouldn't tolerate it. So they ran them out of communities. They ended up in Utah, and there's a whole history there. But I want to show you something that I just saw on the Roseanne Barr show, and I've been trying to explain this to people about Charlie Kirk's assassination. There were demonic forces behind that because something's coming, and they needed Charlie Kirk's sacrifice, his blood, to make something else happen, to give them the energy, the power. Just like when a bunch of Christians get together and we fast and we pray and we repent, things happen, things change, breakthroughs, right? Breakthroughs happen. Well, that's what the demonic church is looking for. They're looking for a specific type of breakthrough, if you catch my drift. And that is why I truly believe Charlie Kirk is actually dead, because they needed him dead.
I didn't join their clubs, but heard. So anyway, 24 hours before, but somebody was saying after Charlie was assassinated, that one billionaire had paid all these witches on Etsy to put a curse on Charlie. Well, so, okay, now you're going to tie all this in.
Yeah, well, first...
They were called Jezebel, by the way. I don't know if you knew that.
Yes,
Jezebel,
yes.
That was their website.
Yeah. First is that it's like this. One of the things that the Avatar is bringing out is that there's such a spiritual war for the future of America. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's gotten so intense that it actually is shedding the blood of a key person, in this spiritual war.
Yes.
And so that's what we're dealing with the future of America. We got to but also, it was like a little before that, you had a demonic shooting in Minnesota.
Right.
And it was against, again, these demonic shootings, it's like against, a church or against people praying, what is this?
Children.
Children. That's demonic. And in fact, the guy in Minnesota actually drew a picture of a demon telling him to do it. I mean, totally demonic. Remember Nashville, same thing. And there's the gender issue and this whole thing. So here Charlie Kirk is being asked about it at that very moment, asked about this shooting and about particularly this demonic shooting in Minnesota, and then demonic shooting comes to him, and there's all these issues. So that's the first thing, is we're dealing with a spiritual thing. Second, as you just said, yes, it's true, and it's not conspiracy theory. There was a woman who paid witches, more than about 3, I think, at least 2 or 3, to place a curse on Charlie Kirk, and it just came out. It was just, she published this on September 8th. 2 days later, it happened. Yeah. And the thing is that one of the witches took a photo of Charlie Kirk and burned it. I mean, this is, now listen, God's in charge, not the witches, but we do know there are actors and forces, and so this is what that's about.
It's a war.
Yeah, it is a war, and for instance, the place where this all happened, it was in Orem, Utah. You know what Orem means? Means the dragon.
Jeez.
I didn't know that.
And also means it's a double thing. It means the dragon and the serpent, and there's only one who's called both. It's in Revelation in the Bible is the enemy, and of course, and then Charlie Kirk. Think about that. What does his name mean? It means church. So it's a war against the church or the people of God, and so the dragon, he came to the land of the dragon. The dragon struck him, but of course he doesn't win, and God's going to use it for good. God's going to use it for the good. But so there's a whole big thing, and yes, the other thing is you said it. The organization that the woman who placed the curse on him or had the witches was working for Jezebel, an organization. Jezebel, I mean, of all things, and in the Bible, and we were saying this before, and it's interesting, is because Jezebel rises up in the Bible when it linked to the nation turning away from God. So if we turn away from God, we're going to have this spirit.
You create a vacuum, something rushes in to fill the space.
Exactly. We call them liberals.
Exactly. There's a parable, that Jesus told, that he said that a man is possessed, he gets delivered, and then he stays empty. It's a vacuum. He stays empty. So it says the spirit comes back and brings 7 others. And so the worse, he ends up being worse. And people think, okay, that's about a guy. Well, it's not about a guy. It's about an entire civilization, because he says it's with this generation. What happened is when Jesus or Yeshua, when he spread forth the gospel, what it did is it drove out the gods, drove out the spirits, so it was like an exorcism that happened to the West. But the warning is, any nation or civilization or culture, if it once knew God and empties itself of God, what was cast out is going to come back in.
Right.
And so what we've been watching since like the 60s onward, we drove out God. And we've been watching not just like a general thing. This is one of the things of the Avatar. It's not just a general kind of the gods. We can actually identify them because they're in the Bible.
Yeah.
For instance, you got Baal. When Israel turned away from God, you had Baal. So this is the spirit that drives God out of everything and replaces it with paganism. And his sign was the bull. Which we talked about that brazen bull in Wall Street, But and actually, you know what it is with paganism? With paganism, it's with polytheism, with you have one God, you got one truth. You got truth. But when you have many gods, you don't have one truth. Everybody has their own truth. It's my
personal opinion. This is what I think. I get this all the time. This is what I think. This is what I believe. This is what I feel. Everybody is recreating Jehovah Jireh in their own image. Again, let me clearly state this. I serve the same exact God that the Jewish people serve. Okay? The Old Testament is actually the Torah. I know if people don't know this, but they don't. It's part of the Torah. Okay? So I actually read the same Bible that the Jews read. 80% of Jewish people do not believe Jesus was the Messiah. It actually explains that in the Bible, why that happened. And everything in Revelation happens so that the Jewish people come back to God. So if you turn on the Jewish people, then you are essentially turning on the actual God, the God. I'm just saying. A lot of people, they get that very messed up. Like, you're supposed to hate the Jews because they didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. We all knew that. Like, it's in the Bible that the majority of them didn't believe it. But you know who were the very, very first prophets? The very, very first evangelists, the very, very first preachers of the gospel? They were Jews who did believe in Jesus Christ. So no, not every Jew does not believe Jesus was the Messiah. Got to be careful, folks. Lot of false gods rising up. A lot of false prophets. Okay, so I think this is very important. This is the connection between the Masonic symbols and the Mormons. I told y'all earlier, few videos ago, 4 or 5 ago, Charlie Kirk had to be assassinated in Utah. It had to. It's all connected spiritually, because that land, though a lot of Mormon people are going to be offended by this, that's on you, has been dedicated to false gods for so long. The land of the dragon.
Don't forget to grab yourself a quick cup of devil's bean juice. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel. I have a new video about Mormonism, the church, doctrine, history, my experience every single week. If you were one of those people who participated in the death oaths, please comment below, because personal firsthand accounts are some of the most powerful sources to be like, yes, this did actually happen. Ex-Mormons are not just making it up. This is something that's been existing in the church since the 1800s. So comment if you ever participated, grab your cup of coffee, and let's read the specific wording of the death oath. Like I said, there were 3 specific oaths. I'm going to be reading the first one. I'll read all 3. I'm also going to be comparing them to the wording in early Masonic ceremonies just to show how similar they are. Here's what you would have been asked to say as part of your participation in the ceremony. It says, "We and each of us covenant and promise that we will not reveal any of the secrets of this, the first token of the Aaronic priesthood, with its accompanying name, sign, or penalty. Should we do so, we agree that our throats be cut from ear to ear and our tongues torn out by their roots." But it's not a cult. I'll link all of this below, but to read specifically from this script, you can see that if I read the redacted portions, it says, "They are most sacred and are guaranteed by solemn covenants and obligations of secrecy to the effect that under no condition, even at the peril of your life, will you ever divulge them, except at a certain place that will be shown you hereafter." And so I read the redacted version of what would have been said. The updated version simply said that under no condition will you ever divulge them. So they just deleted that "at the peril of your life" portion that is included within these death oaths. And so to be super clear, any form of talking about the temple, especially talking about the signs and the tokens, the handshakes, the symbols you make with your body, talking about anything to do with that is seen as apostasy. It's seen as basically the most heretical you can be. That and probably talking or showing garments specifically. Anything that happens in the walls of a temple. So garments, the washing and anointing, the endowment, the new name, all of those things are basically the most sacred parts of Mormonism. And so that's why talking about them is seen as the most taboo. This is why, of course, I didn't know about anything that happened in a temple until I was sitting in the seat myself and experiencing it myself for the first time. And even though I knew it was very secretive, I think that understanding the legacy of the death oath also helps me understand why it was so secretive and why it's seen as so heretical. Because while I never had to promise that I would end my life if I, for example, showed the handshake, that one of the handshakes that it takes to get into heaven, other members were told that they would literally have to end their life if they showed these secrets. And so while I, when I make my videos, I know, of course, that it's a huge taboo, it's considered heretical, it's apostasy. The people who came before me had this added layer that they had once literally promised to kill themselves if they talked about these things. The death oaths as part of the temple endowment have been part of that ceremony since 1842. And this goes all the way back to Joseph Smith and Joseph Smith's involvement in Masonry. In this video, I'm going to read the Masonic words and then the Mormon temple ceremony words, and you'll see just how similar and sometimes literally exactly the same they are. But just to say that this has been part of the temple endowment for a very, very long time. And it was not removed until 1990, which means that a lot of the membership of people who are members of the church did this. A prophet had these death oaths. My parents would have done them. If your parents went through the temple before 1990, they will be familiar with the fact that at one point they were asked to basically make a suicide pact as part of promising they would never reveal the secrets of the temple. What's insane is that they've gone to such great lengths to make sure that the temple is secretive that any member you meet that is, went through the temple after 1990 will probably swear. They'll say there were never any death oaths, there were never any penalties, she's lying, she's an anti-Mormon, she's ex-Mormon, she's just trying to tear the church down. And then you get someone in the room who was going to the temple before 1990, and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, we did do that. But most of them...
All right, I'm gonna fast forward it to right here.
The shutter would click as part of taking that photo. And to me, that's what I think of when I think of how the church has slowly removed these elements from the temple ceremony, because the vestige is still there. There's like echoes of the original cruelty that was present in the temple ceremony, but it's inaccessible to new members who don't quite comprehend why that might be a thing. It reminds me too of like the dial-up tone that's like doo 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 that I also heard when I was growing up and connecting to the internet, that if I played that for my son, he would have, no idea what that sound meant. But these echoes of things from the past do still carry weight, but only for some people and only in some capacity. So another example of the violence being still present in the temple ceremony today is that there are different signs that you do as part of your participation in the temple. So one sign is your left hand is in cupping shape and your right hand is basically like this. And this is understood to have meant that this was meant to catch your bowels falling out when you perform the penalty, and this was the knife that was used to complete the penalty. So when I went through the temple, I did this as my sign associated with a promise I was making, but I didn't understand at the time that what this is meant to represent is an echo of the violence and the death oaths that were once part of the ceremony. As I get a little bit more into the history, I'll be using some different resources. I highly suggest, if you want a deep dive, checking out this book. It's called The Mysteries of Godliness by David Berger. He also, if you don't want to buy the whole book, he has a great PDF that's basically a summary of what he goes over in the book. I've also shown this one-pager. It's available in a PDF. You can go zoom in because there's a lot of detail to it. This is by far the best summary I've found of the endowment, and it also goes specifically into some of the changes. It illustrates the penalties, so check that out. I'll be using screenshots from this as well. There's also Gerald and Sandra Tanner's work. They have a ton of resources online. They have one.
I wanted to show you that part so you guys know where you can go to get more information about what I'm trying to show you. Now, this has to do with the Marine that shot up the Mormon church the other day. He was Mormon at one point in the LDS church, but he also called them the Antichrist. Listen to what this gentleman was running for office with the glasses on. He stops by a house and he starts speaking to what becomes the Mormon church shooter a week later. Listen what he says.
I could give you a general description, but he really met me, and we really stayed in one spot at the end of the driveway.
It must be weird. I'm just putting myself in your shoes. Like if I had a 20-minute interaction with someone that I found to be like, not that I don't agree with, that you obviously didn't agree with the things he was saying, but that you just thought that he was like tame. And then to hear that someone that you met who just seemed quote unquote sort of normal is capable of doing what he did, like that must be kind of hard to process.
Correct. And the part that I really want to resonate with is that, like, my daughter was with me. Her mother had a night meeting, and so instead of being at home after school, she was with me. She's safely secured in her seat. We just kind of go house to house. And he had mentioned he goes, what's your daughter's name? Because my daughter's internet, she's adopted from India. She has autism. She's not super verbal, but she reached out, and he reached out and grabbed her hand. As a father, it was, you pick up on creeper vibes. Nothing. He had a genuine heart at that time when he reached out, and ultimately, and then he talked about his child. And what gets me when you mentioned that, your last comment, he took himself away from his child. Like, he has a sick child that he took ultimately his father away from, which is himself. He took other people's fathers away from I don't know the entire toll, but we're starting to see that it was a number of men who died in the attack. This is a guy who, with true compassion, like had a very warm moment with my child, and I came across with no vibes. And then less than a week later, he turns his truck into a missile and destroys a church. There's nothing in that interaction.
He can't understand it, just like most of us cannot, because we're generally good people. All right. I'm going to show you at the end of this what's actually happening. Here's another suspect. 20-year-old Nigel Edge had his first court appearance Monday afternoon. He was awarded the Marine Purple Heart, and he's also being convicted, or he's going through trial for the North Carolina waterfront bore shooting, which happened basically almost at the same time as the Mormon church. So he changed his name from Sean William de Bovee in 2023. He actually wrote a book. This gentleman did right here, him. He wrote a book about how friendly fire when he was over in the Middle East changed his life. I haven't read the book, but he also makes, let me look it up, because he also makes an insinuation. It says Nigel Edge, the guy who shot up a restaurant in North Carolina, has filed a lawsuit claiming a church was behind a civil conspiracy masterminded by the LGBTQ community and white supremacist pedophiles to kill him. He has also filed a similar suit against a medical center, accusing it of being part of a conspiracy launched by LGBTQ white supremacists who were out to get him because he survived their attack in Iraq. Something's here. This gentleman and the other one, there is something here that people are glossing over. How much you want to bet there are ties between this gentleman, Nigel Edge, and the Mormon church? How much you want to bet that this guy, there's something there? Because y'all do not really realize the amount of Mormon people involved in the federal government, even through MK Ultra. I found a thing earlier. Let me look it up real quick. It says the Space Shuttle Challenger was not necessarily blown up by the Mormon church. However, I have not seen it pointed out how many Mormons were connected to the disaster. To be crystal clear, Mormons did not blow up Challenger, but they were very involved in the shuttle program. Challenger provides a window into this period of history and how members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints found themselves attached to the U.S. government's high technology projects. Ironic considering how strongly Mormons hold to their antiquated beliefs. There was James Fletcher. He was a NASA administrator. There was Morton Thokel, the Utah-based rocket manufacturer that built the shuttle. There was Hydrapack, the manufacturer of the fatal O-rings. Then there was Don Lind, a Mormon astronaut who flew on a nearly disastrous earlier Challenger mission. I'm going to read you something from the gospel fundamentals of the Mormon Church. To live in the highest part of the celestial kingdom is called exaltation of eternal life. To be able to live in this part of the celestial kingdom, people must have been married in the temple and must have kept the sacred promises they made in the temple. They will receive everything our Father in heaven has and will become like him. They will even be able to have spirit children and make new worlds for them to live in and do all things for our Father has done. Our Father in heaven has done. That's Gospel Fundamentals from 2002, page 201. As essential requirement for exaltation is a celestial marriage, for exaltation depends upon the continuation of the family in eternity and the power to populate other worlds as our Father did this one. Principles of the Gospel, 1990, page 161. The current manual for college-aged adults is called Presidents of the Church. There's both a student and a teacher's manual. The couplet reads, as man now is, God once was. As God now is, man may be. Teachers are also instructed to have students read a portion of the student manual titled, They Shall Organize Worlds and Rule Over Them. There was a Presidents of the Church Student Manual, Religion 345, 2013, pages 90 through 91. President Brimhall, these children are now at play, making mud worlds. The time will come when some of these boys, through their faithfulness to the gospel, will progress and develop in knowledge, intelligence, and power in future eternities until they shall be able to go out into space where there is organized matter and call together the necessary elements, and through their knowledge of and control over the laws and powers of nature, to organize matter into worlds on which their posterity may dwell, and over which they shall rule as gods. Okay. I'm just saying. Got one more to read for y'all. Let me then turn to a third side of the influence of church history on Mitt Romney. One aspect of this abandonment of theocracy was a pullback from government in general. Mormons realized that theocracy led to pain. And as a member, as a church, they became very sensitive about any kind of theocratic involvement in government. They rebranded, right? They rebranded. So they basically decided to say that anyone that's in Mormonism that has entered the political scene, that the church will not interfere in politics or in the action of any politicians who are members of the church, and that policy hasn't changed over the century. That's what they tell you on the face, but let's be very, very honest. They have and always will be looking to have their own place. It says that in 19th century Mormon theologians drew careful, if not always consistent, distinctions between church and kingdom, the Council of the 50, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ye are my constitution, and I am your God, and ye are my spokesman, is a constitutional ideal easily taken up in a church populated by prophets and apostles. By shifting theocratic ideas from the political kingdom of God to the ecclesiastical structure of the church, Cannon and those that followed him could reach back to Joseph Smith's earliest revelations on the U.S. Constitution without the later constitutional complications of the Council of 50. It is a constitutional vision that allows contemporary Latter-day Saints to make their peace with human governments and continue to build up the kingdom of God, all bet in radically different ways than their 19th century forebears attempted. In other words, they do not approve of the federal government. They do not want to be ruled by the federal government, but they have very smart people in their church. And they decided that they couldn't outright fight the federal government. They would not win, but they could very much infiltrate. And from the shadows, control like puppet masters. And they are good at it, just like the Jesuits. I'm going to read you something. And it's going to be hard for a lot of people to understand. It's called the Black Awakening. And so it begins, part 1, a prophetic future. You could feel it in the air tonight. It had the aroma of blood and frenzy. The atmosphere was charged with it. It was menacing. murderous, and malevolent, all in one, but clearly much so more. The present, an ancient force presence of violence and evil was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I could sense it was on. Everything seemed on edge and ready to erupt. For years, I knew this dark night was coming. It was now at the door. Then I heard the first shots. I jumped up and went to the window to watch. Like I always had the cable news, the internet, shortwave, and the radio all on at the same time. At the first explosions began far away. Then I could tell they were coming closer and closer. I had my family near me. We were praying, and we did prepare. Immediately, the phone rang, and a friend of mine was screaming at me on the other end. That thing, that subject, that seminar you taught on and warned us about, it's happening, isn't it? I can't locate my family, and all the lights are out. The person seemed angry at me. Where'd they go? Sorry. I thought of that phrase, don't shoot the messengers. Emails began pouring in with stories of crazy things, shootings, explosions, screams, and people going raving mad everywhere. And I mean everywhere. News flashes were coming in. The media people were frantic. The sound of police sirens could be heard everywhere. This clearly was only the beginning. I just sat there watching, waiting for the next thing. I knew much more would follow. What is he talking about? He's talking about the Black Awakening, when super soldiers, when our military and our young people who have been programmed through programs like MK Ultra will become heralds on this earth. It says here, I had tracked them for many years. I confronted some of them. Some of them confronted me. They had a hate that came from way back, but what they really lacked was information. They were so one-sided. The words of God were off limit to them. They were not permitted to read it for themselves. They weren't supposed to talk to others about their roles. They were controlled in every way. Control was the key. They boasted this to me many times. They really believed they would have it all, rule it all. They actually believed that they could take, yes, even take the seat of God. Believe it or not, they thought they found a way to kill God. I wondered who would join this masquerade globalist agenda. Evil was on the loose like a big bloody bull in a china shop. An old, ancient, twisted presence had now broken loose. In the past, it was sneaky and in the dark. We were like a frog being cooked in the rising heat of a pot of water. Now it came all at once, like a bat out of hell. More calls on the cell phones came in, more news flashes. It was finally clear to me. This terror was occurring all over the United States, in every city and in every place. Most were shocked and horrified to hear it was happening in Canada, England, all over Europe. How could this be so vast? Nations were blaming each other. All were on alert. Warplanes were in the sky. The red phones were buzzing. Calls for calm and caution were given by many. It seemed like no one was in control. No one had a handle on it. Governments were putting on a face of control, but they couldn't even control what was happening from within. Sabotage and deadly betrayal were the daily realities. Nations shook as leaders died mysterious deaths. Many thought the end of the world had come. The end of something had. The truth is, this Black Awakening was not the end. For them, it was the beginning of their public agenda, their final solution times 1,000. I stood opposed to it all. I also stood energized by the truth, knowing that another ancient one, the Ancient of Days, would soon take his place. What is coming is going to be worse than most Americans can even imagine. So that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to basically, hold on, Sam, my thing isn't charging. They're going to create such horrific things that most even Christians will beg someone to save them. The Antichrist will rule under what is considered a theocratic or theocracy government across the entirety of the world. And when they're done prepping you for it, most people won't even realize. They'll just be thankful that things are calm again. I think everybody needs to just, stop being offended when we speak about spiritual things. Stop getting scared. When I say wake up, I mean, like, this is a spiritual battle. Charlie Kirk had to die. He had to die in Utah to power up whatever's coming. We're in October. October 10th is coming. You better research what they're expecting to do on October 10th. Right? I love you guys so very much. If you'd like to support our channel, please do. If you'd like to know where to get Growing Under a Poisoned Sky, that's easy. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's on Barnes and Nobles. You can find it at Walmart online. That's a way to support us. Please share this video. That's another way you can support us. Hit the like button. Share the video with friends and family. I know that this may seem, conspiracy, but it's all very provable. Every bit of it is history. And what do we know about history? That it repeats itself. I just think we need to be very aware that what we're going to see is that these, somebody's going to try to fill the void of Charlie Kirk. Just like Roseanne said, when you remove something, everything rushes in to fill that void. What is going to fill Charlie Kirk's void? Who? What group? Because the kids are the key. The kids are the key. That's why so many of them were brought in and lost in our country. President Trump said that in his UN speech the other day. He said, we've returned 30,000 children to parents that thought they would never see them again in South America, in Central America. Those kids were kidnapped, brought here as if they were unaccompanied minors, or brought in with people who acted like they were their family. Because what did Biden do? He removed the DNA swabs of these children to the adults. They did that so they could bring them in. They brought them in drugged. There's reports from ICE agents that have quit over that. Drugged babies coming into America. Where are those children now? Trump basically said it will probably never find them. And the UN funded that. The UN was created to help usher in the Antichrist. Just like the same people that created the UN basically created what everybody's, claiming is the not Israel. It was created by the bad Jews and regardless of why they did it, they were still fulfilling biblical prophecy. God's going to win, friends and family. He's going to win. So hope you enjoyed this little deep dive into why I'm a little concerned that we're seeing a whole bunch of, Mormon shooters running around. I'm just saying. I love you guys so much. Be blessed. Have a great day, guys.